Greetings, Bob. Thank you. Greetings. Thank you for tuning in this happy Sunday to all of you that are tuning in this afternoon. It's afternoon here in the great state of Texas, and thanks to all of our brothers that are watching, those in Ground Zero. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Samuel. So I am going to be broadcast live here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States, and those that are watching, I will be broadcast live on my Facebook as well and on my YouTube as well. On my YouTube, it's called Transparency Media International, and then you should be able to get through. And I want to take a moment to thank all of you, all my fellow brothers and sisters that are tuning me live across this globe. Thank you, Joel, for joining in. Thank you, Luis, for joining in. And today, I have been broadcast about the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs. And today, he is physically in the neighboring country, La Republic of Cameroon. And we're gonna see what is his outcome of his journey to the neighboring country, La Republic of Cameroon. And so, as you see the images, but there is one thing that I am gonna be speaking, but I want to keep the United States government, especially the U.S. Department of Defense, to be on the watch list. Because it is quite important that the United States doesn't take this matter lightly. We experienced the gravitational force that happened in Benghazi when four of our diplomats lose their lives in Benghazi. And so that is why I am giving, while the important top U.S. officials is in the neighboring country, La Republic of Cameroon. But I urge the U.S. Department of Defense to watch extra precautionally as this high-level personality is in La Republic. And so the evidence that I'm going to be talking about, while I shall come more on this, I will take a look at these images, although I haven't got a clear answer who this person was, and I'm going to show more of those images. And that I am led the United States Department of Defense to take extra precaution. Because we will not, in any circumstances, while we, the United States government, ensure that peace and stability reign around the world. But however, there are some individuals that try to attempt to minimize the integrity of the United States, and they want to take advantages of the United States. And that is why I am alert the U.S. Department of Defense to take extra precautionary and also want to let the AFRICOM to be on fully alert, as the highest top U.S. diplomat is in La Republique. Let me take a look, let me present some of the case before we dive into what a discussion that's going to make up the day today. Let's look at some of the images. This is the U.S. Undersecretary that just arrived in La Republique. And the greatest threat to my own understanding, the greatest threat is the U.S. ambassador in the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon. Peter Henry Berlin. Peter Henry Berlin is under a threat by La Republique du Cameroon. The threat is not the U.S. Undersecretary that is currently, but the threat is the U.S. ambassador to the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon, Peter Henry Berlin. He has been an outspoken because of the terrorists that is being perpetrated by La Republique du Cameroon, led by the Biya regime, although he's mentally deranged. But let's look at some of that. Is the U.S. ambassador standing, that is the U.S. ambassador Peter Henry. And the person here, I don't know who is. I want to know who is this particular individual. Who is he? If he is a U.S. security agent that happens to be there to monitor, but that doesn't seem to portray that. So therefore, he seems like more of a threat to the U.S. ambassador, although nobody threatens the United States in anywhere in this world, anywhere in this planet. The United States is capable to stand any momentum in any part of the world, in any part in this globe. And U.S. stand and speak without fear or favor of any individual or any nations, so long as they don't respect the will of the law and they respect the will of the people. And that is why extra precautionary for those who are citizens of these great nations that may stand against, speak against atrocity that is being perpetrated around the world. Their lives is also at a threat. And so therefore, I am bringing this attention to the U.S. Department of Defense. I am also bringing this attention to the U.S. Congress. I am bringing this attention to the White House, that while the Undersecretary is in the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon, it is not quite safe for the U.S. ambassador. Although U.S. ambassador can speak in any part of the world without fear or favor. But when you look at these images, and when you look at the U.S. ambassador standing here, and you see the Undersecretary, his movement, it seems there's something going on. There is some threat that is going on. There is some threat, because when you look at the images here, it shows that something is going wrong here. But we haven't investigated to find out exactly what happened in this scenario. But we're going to know more what happened. And who is this person in question? So United States shouldn't stay calm, because we learned a lesson from the Benghazi case, when 4 diplomats lose their lives because we didn't pay close attention. And so therefore I am urging the U.S. Department of Defense to pay close attention what happens there. Because we haven't justified clearly what happened here, why U.S. ambassador stand like he was standing in a fear. He was standing like he was under duress. He stand like he was under a threat. But we don't know exactly who this person is and who is, and I understand that he has been threatened by agents of La Republique. But I am here to show the American citizens here that while the chaotic that is going on in West Africa and the terrorists perpetrated by La Republique du Cameroon against its own citizens, against its own people, but I am here to expose this to the world. That while the U.S. ambassador is doing his job to ensure that the voice of the voiceless be heard across the globe, but it comes without a price. And so that is why we are seeing these images as one of those clear examples. As one of those clear examples that is showing that the U.S. ambassador does stand at his normal position, not in his usual behavior, because that's the person I believe he can stand anywhere and voice his concern without fear or favor. But in this particular moment, in these particular images that I'm portraying, it showed that something was going wrong somewhere in this scenario. But I urge the U.S. Department of Defense, I urge the U.S. CIA, I urge the U.S. to be on fully alert in this moment henceforth. I think these show you more clearly. They show you more clearly about the scenario. And when you look at the U.S. Undersecretary, it seems he was more concerned. And you can see how he walks towards. And you can see how his flying jacket looked like that there was more of a problem than what they had anticipated. And the threat is geared towards the U.S. ambassador, Peter Henry Berlin. And that is what I am here to show, that the United States must be fully prepared and must be fully alert, must be fully ready in case there's something going wrong fidgeting by the Republic of Cameroon. United States Department of Defense, U.S. AFRICOM, they must be fully be prepared should there be any emergency. Because the behavior shown in this on the visit of the highest U.S. diplomats in the crisis erupted in La Republique. And that shows that there is something going on that must be change the course of vision of the United States in case vis-a-vis La Republique du Cameroon. Because these images, and when you see the Undersecretary, the way the Undersecretary, his behavior and his move, and these particular individuals almost stood motionless. It seemed there was a threat, and the threat was coming towards not the Undersecretary, but the U.S. diplomat currently residing in the neighboring country, La Republique. And therefore, the U.S. embassy in neighboring country, La Republique, must be in full defense system, must be in full, must be fully alert in case of any eventuality. We cannot take chances that happen in Benghazi and ignore. So therefore, I am bringing this attention to the U.S. Department of Defense, and I understand that the United States Department of Defense are working 24 hours monitoring closely what is going on in the neighboring country, La Republique. But however, I just bring these images as extra precautionary, and that they should be prepared as the UN Undersecretary is in La Republique du Cameroon. Fellow United States, this is not a moment that the United States need to be slumber or sluggish, but the United States must be fully prepared and ready should there be any call for engagement. But when you look now, it seems after that moment, that brief moment, the tension subsides, and that you can see the relaxation of the Undersecretary after that tense moment. And I'm sure that particular individual was taken away, and he's no longer within the vicinity of the Undersecretary, including the U.S. diplomat, Peter Henry, the current U.S. ambassador. And now you can see the Undersecretary is more of relaxing and more of, he can smile, and you can see his face showing that the tension has been brought calm down. But who that particular individual was, we are not aware, and we don't know who he was. But we will know more detailedly and who that person was, and why was he a threat to the U.S. ambassador to the neighboring country, La Republique du Cameroon. This is Fulton Daniel speaking here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States. Stay with me. Why? The United States Undersecretary, before he traveled to La Republic, let's listen to his statement that he made. Today, he is physically in the La Republic. He's now physically in La Republic. And so let's see his outcome and who are the potential persons that he will be meeting. But however, before we go into detail who he will be meeting, let's look at his statement. And he brought out in the French 24 media.
Will be the president in 2019.
Wow. At the time, the way the election that I observed back in 1991 went, the possibility was certainly there. You know, he has been in charge of Cameroon, I think, longer now than I believe any other serving African head of state. Maybe Obiang, but I think definitely there. The problem is, with such long service, so many fundamental problems have gone unaddressed, and we see this now in the northwest, southwest, or what some people call the Anglophone region of Cameroon. In addition, you know, Cameroon has two very serious problems. One is in the north with Boko Haram, ISIS, West Africa. And in that part of it, we are working very closely with the Cameroonians as allies to address the problem of terrorism. The more fundamental problem, and in my view, the more existential problem for Cameroon is what's going on in the Anglophone region. The government has been totally, in my view, ineffective in addressing that. Some of their actions have actually worsened what is going on there. There's been just a mounting cycle of violence from both sides. The radicals in the northwest, the ones who call themselves the Ambo Boys, and then the security forces. We've had horrendous loss of life, casualties. I think October, November, December of last year were the three highest. Now it's somewhat decreased. A great majority of the casualties are those on the Anglophone side. The Cameroon government is just not being proactive in addressing this problem.
And will you be meeting with President Biya?
I certainly hope so. We have asked that. Of course, it's up to the Cameroon government as to who I meet with.
And will you be asking for the release of Maurice Kamto, the presidential candidate?
I will. I will. I think that would be a very positive gesture. There are a number of, I think, gestures the Cameroon government could do immediately, which would start to diffuse the problem, but at the end of the...
So you all listen. That was the Undersecretary speaking at the French 24 radio media in relationship on what is going on in the Southern Cameroon territory that is being perpetrated by La Republic of Cameroon, that I continue slaughtering citizens of innocent people of Southern Cameroon. Remember that the people of Southern Cameroon was never a colonial territory of La Republic, and that and they were never a colonial territory of La Republic. Neither was a conquered territory of La Republic. La Republic got their independence in 1960 and recognized by the world body. And so too, the Republic of the people of Southern Cameroon got their independence in 1961. And that many nations voted to recognize. However, the fact that they are cohabiting relationships that bring La Republic, instead by virtue, La Republic believed that an assumption, false assumption, that they own the people of Southern Cameroon and that they can utilize whatever military suppression and repress the people of Southern Cameroon and use extrajudicial killing of the people, of the sons and daughters of the Southern Cameroon. But I am here to speak up and let the world understand, especially the citizens of this great nation, the United States, that our brothers and sisters that have been subsequently brutally murdered by the dictatorship of a brutal dictatorship that has been in power for 36 years and unelected and unappointed, and he wasn't even elected as a president. He wasn't. It happens because someone happened to be a president, and because of the forgery that is perpetrated by the French authority, a forgery that is perpetrated by French government. France, inadvertently told the former president that he is suffering from a vulnerable disease that he could take off his life. And he stepped aside and assigned this dictatorship that has been in power for 36 years, murdering innocent people, slaughtering every people that I can count on. And today, he is still there. You all know Jacques Chirac. Jacques Chirac is a former French president. They are of equivalent age together. Paul Biya and Jacques Chirac, who is in France, the former French president, Jacques Chirac. As in speaking, he doesn't even know that he was a French president, Jacques Chirac. Jacques Chirac doesn't recognize that he once been a French president. So then you can understand that if someone with equivalent age as Paul Biya can recall that he was a president of France and he's suffering from psychosis, suffering from mental deprivation in France, Jacques Chirac, he can't even speak, he can't communicate. He's living in a wandering land. He doesn't remember that he once been a president of France. Then can you imagine Paul Biya of the similar age and he's a president of a nation? Then you can give him the mental stability of that particular individual called Paul Biya. Paul Biya, he's mentally, he can't comprehend. First, he doesn't even know from his office, they call a tudy, back to his wife's bedroom. Paul Biya doesn't remember how to walk from his bedroom or from his office back to his bedroom where his wife lives, because the wife must guide him back to the room. You can watch. If there is a media, let the CRTV prove me wrong. CRTV is their media. Let it prove me wrong. Because they can. They understand that is a clear fact. And they can't even demonstrate it. Paul Biya is suffering from psychosis. Mental retardation is the worst psychosis. And you all know that in Bangante, for those of you in Bangante, you can imagine a mad person that is mentally deranged simply wrote on a wall from Bangante. And you can imagine that the police went and arrested this guy and tortured him to death. That can give you the kind of a country they call La Republic of Cameroon. You can imagine that someone that is suffering from mental problem and he's simply writing on a wall. And you imagine that the police department in Bangante, went and arrested this guy and tortured him to death. I can't make it up. I can't figure it out. Because when someone in mental psychosis, suffering from the repressive disorder, and that he will be writing on the wall, and a police will have the audacity to arrest this guy because he's speaking about another fellow colleague that is suffering from psychosis. The differences between Paul Biya and the guy that was killed in Bangante is that he's being guided. He's being guided. That's the difference. Otherwise, both of them are of the same level. They're both of the same level of psychosis. But anyway, I was talking about Chirac. That drove me to there. But anyway, Jacques Chirac is the former president of France that has the similar category as Paul Biya in La Republique. Chirac doesn't remember. And if that country, La Republique, is a country that is built on law, that is built on a constitution, then the constitution should have made insertion and asked him to dispose. He shouldn't have been a president because he's mentally incapacitated to become a president, to remain in power, because he doesn't know the day-to-day running of the entire country. Imagine that the wife is running the day-to-day of a country because the president is suffering from mental psychosis. Can you believe this? Can you? So there is no difference between Biya and Chirac. There is no difference. But Chirac has already relinquished power, and another person is taking over power. But unfortunately, Biya is being covered up. Biya is being covered up. It's being covered up. And the wife is now an interim president, acting as though he is the president of a country, because the president, whom they claim to be, Paul Biya, is mentally incapacitated. He's mentally incapacitated. He doesn't remember his daughter's name. He doesn't remember his son's name. He can't recall where he left his room and back. Those are the two. Because if you can't know your room and your office, then that is absolutely I don't have word to describe it. That is absolutely disgusting. But anyway, let's go back to what makes up the story of the day. Well, we shall come back to this. But the one important thing that I want to talk about is the French hypocrisy, the European Union hypocrisy. You see, I am so proud of the United States. To be honest with you, I am proud of the United States. That is the nation on the planet that you can stand and speak up and say, oh, this is a nation. It's only the United States. But let's look at what make up news, especially the European Union. They call the European, whatever they call it. Let's look at what make up news in European Union. When they sit in their parliament, you will expect them to come bring out concrete issues that is affecting the global world. But unfortunately, can you believe that European Union intentionally funded Libya to commit atrocity against immigrants in Libya? That the European Union intentionally funding the Libya to carry on catastrophic events in Libya. That is the worst thing that one will expect, that the European will be funding that without, and it's usual and it's normal. Let's look at what make up the news. Just hold on. It's not quite, it's painful. It's painful. It's painful to see the European Parliament or the European Union, whatever you can call it, and that is a clear difference between the United States. United States is the most amazing nation on this planet. Whether you agree with my assessment or my definition, I don't really care if you agree with me, but United States is the best nation on this planet. But however, when you look at the hypocrisy perpetrated by the European Union, indirectly funding atrocity and being perpetrated in Libya. I know you are familiar with Libya because of what happened to the Benghazi issues when 4 citizens of the United States were murdered But however, this case is different from the one that I am going to be speaking about. Can you imagine that the European is funding atrocity to be perpetrated in Libya? Some of these images that you're going to be seeing is going to be catastrophic. But however, I am letting you to understand that European Union is absolutely disgusting. Let's look, let's watch. Intentionally. Let's look. Before we go to that problem in particular, let's take out the problem. Why do Africans have these problems? The problem is the European, especially when I speak European, I mean France in particular. Because France is the architect of atrocity that's been perpetrated in Africa. France is the architect because France supports dictatorship, finance dictatorship, and prevent ample democratic government to prevail. And that is why what caused citizens began to revolt, because they are not being prevented to participate in their nation building. And so because they are being prevented, the only option they have is to choose another way around. Either revolt against the system or they do it. And so France is taking advantages, suppress those liberties that the people can decide who should govern them. And in the meantime, the people now look for greener pasture. Greener pasture means searching for a safe environment. And in doing so, they become an migrant. They end up where? In Libya. Or they end up in Europe. Because France is the architect that perpetrating this atrocity by forcing dictatorship to stay in power so that the interests of France should prevail. Like we have one in Cameroon. We have one. Paul Biya, he's not different. You have Algeria. You have Tunisia. I'm glad Tunisia came out and said, no, we're not going to tolerate this. Tunisia came out and said, no, they're not going to tolerate that. Algeria have a one-time president that has been in power for how many? You have Ivory Coast, you have Senegal, you have others. France is ensured that whoever is the president is in line with the French, rather than in line with the people that govern in that particular environment. And France controls the monetary policy, the amount of currency, and whereas French currency is not made in Africa. Let's listen to what is happening here.
Condition bubble of the summit in the desert. For European leaders, all fighting off populist challenges at home, triggered by the migration crisis, this meeting was above all about one issue.
I want to acknowledge and salute all those.
That is the European Parliament representative or chairperson. Let's listen.
Here who have shouldered the burden of population displacement, helped refugees, and acted early to tackle people smuggling.
Put simply, the EU are playing North African countries, above all Libya, and they
I'm sorry, the network quality. The network quality. But what you listen here, it means that the European Parliament is paying the Libyan to provide prison yard for immigrants. Can you understand this? That the European is paying the Libyan authority to retain immigrants. Do you get it? Okay. Let's listen.
Bouquets and backslapping in the air-conditioned bubble of the summit in the desert. For European leaders, all fighting off and transport them to Europe, where they were welcomed.
And acted early to tackle people smuggling.
Put simply, the EU are paying North African countries, above all Libya, a nation in chaos without a functioning government, to catch the migrants and keep them. In the past, NGO ships like this one would rescue drowning migrants and transport them to Europe, where they were welcomed until the political climate changed. The populist government in Italy has refused to let these rescue ships dock. The new policy is to fund the Libyan Coast Guard with ships and training to fish the migrants and refugees out of the sea and send them back to Libya. It has worked. The Libyan route has been
So, in other words, the immigrants that are heading to Europe. So what the European Parliament did was that normally they will allow them to get in when there is stability, and then they will allow them to return. But in this case, the European Parliament is funding the Libyan to perpetrate atrocity. In other words, they ask them to arrest the migrants, and they provide them resources, and they detain them. And the cost of detaining them, the lifestyle is terrifying. As you may watch in this horrendous behavior of the European Parliament.
Virtually shut down,
Look.
but at a terrible human cost, in which European leaders with their domestic concerns are complicit. These are mainly Eritreans, arms crossed, symbolizing a demand for freedom. They once dreamt of safety in Europe, but instead they've ended up detained in Libya, caught up in a nightmare the world is unaware of and Europe has turned a blind eye to.
So Europeans, they don't even care to talk about it because they are accomplices, that they partake in this process that is being carried out in Libya because they are the one funding the Libyan government to carry on. Of course, Libyan government, there's no government in Libya anyway, what I'm speaking, but there's no Libyan in any government, legitimate government in Libya. So they have what they call, but this is what is happening in Libya that is funded by the European Parliament. And that is the atrocity. But remember that Europe is the colonia of Africa. And that is why when we speak, it doesn't matter to them to bring to us attention or speak about it, because they are the one that entrust the atrocity that has been perpetrated by this dictatorship. You imagine Paul Biya. Paul Biya is the one that is mentally deranged and that has been in power for 36 years. And you expect France to kick against him. No, France is the competitor, because since France is the leading architect of the European Union, and seeing Biya stay in power is to an advantage of France, so that they can drain the African resources, as you're going to see in this image. Let's watch.
They're all locked in together. They don't see sunlight. People are fed maybe once a day.
Those are Sally Hagen.
Journalist Sally Hayden has been tracking abuses in Libya's secretive migrant detention camps for months.
I mean, the conditions are horrific. people drinking toilet water to survive.
People drinking water from the toilet in Libya
particularly
because there is no water. Water deprivation.
Detention center I'm in touch with, people have gone a month without tuberculosis medication.
Sally's received dozens of desperate audio and video messages from behind the walls, verified by human rights organizations.
I am from Eritrea. I am the mother of twins. They are we need freedom.
There are 500 people, 120 are from them, women and 20.
You can see the public, you can see the crowd.
We have no water, no food.
No water, no food in Libya. And
centers now has tried to get to Europe and been caught by the Coast Guard and been sent back to Libya.
It gets worse. The migrants and refugees become human commodity. This is the detention center in the town of Kums, just east of Tripoli, the beginning of a chilling crime. These Eritrean men are furious after discovering that some of their friends were sold back to the people traffickers by the guards. Things are so tense that the Libyans guarding them use live ammunition to control the crowd. Despite these protests, the traffickers came back, and many of the men pictured here were later taken away. The UN confirmed that people had indeed gone missing from the Kums detention center, and it expressed concern for their well-being. That concern is not misplaced, as these horrific images apparently demonstrate. Migrants sold back to the trafficking gangs are often tortured on camera.
you can see those are torturing chamber in Libya that is being funded by the European Parliament. I mean, it's absolutely disgusting that the European Parliament will be funding this behavior. I mean, that's, you see, there's something that is absolutely disgusting here. That's something disgusting. That the European Parliament is funding this in Africa. I mean, you see, I mean, it is incomprehensible. It is absolutely incomprehensible that the European Parliament is funding this in Libya. Let's watch. Let's watch.
A gun pointed at his
Look,
head. He's being burned
those
with
are
molten peat.
lay.
All these men being
Burn lay. You can watch.
Women are not exempt. The videos are posted on social media, emojis included. They demand the victims' families crowdsource ransom payments to keep their relatives alive. Call it the Abu Ghraib of the migrant crisis.
I have come across really traumatized clients, teenagers who have been detained in Libya for 2-3 years, pushed back at sea.
London-based immigration lawyers have been gathering evidence of the torture extortion racket.
This is quite disturbing.
Traffickers will call their mom.
This is quite disturbing.
Will torture them to scream, and the parents will be told they had to pay huge sums of money to save them. I have seen here clients covered with scars, completely traumatized. We have got medical reports about the effects of what they went through in Libya.
Graffiti on the walls of Libyan detention centres spells out the despair. Whoever comes into this house, may God help you, says this message. 3 people sold to smugglers on the 7th of December 2018. And simply, Libya is a market for human beings. Current EU policies seem designed to curb migration by funding and training the Libyan Coast Guard, while doing little to monitor the conditions in the camps.
The situation is definitely...
In other words, the European Parliament is funding and training paramilitary in Libya. Get it right. The European Parliament, the EU, is funding in Tripoli a base that will allow the migrants to be sent there, and in the course of sending them to Tripoli, in Libya, this is what they get. And the European Parliament doesn't have an oversight to investigate what it is, since they endorse it to be perpetrated against migrants. But remember that the architects of why the people are migrating is because of the atrocity that is being perpetrated and supported and endorsed by France, who is actually the architect of atrocity that is going on. I have been speaking about Cameroon, maybe as I have been speaking about Cameroon, that we have one dictatorship that has been in power for 36 years and getting to 37. He is mentally incapacitated, and yet France support the regime and continue to ensure that he stays in power. And that is why the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs is, right now that I'm speaking, is in Cameroon. Because of the same atrocity that is perpetrated by the French in Southern Cameroon, the former British colonial territory. So you can imagine that the problem that France is the architect of silence of violence that is surrounding the entire continent of Africa. And is going unnoticed. And that is why I'm showing this case in Libya. Because if I'm speaking about Cameroon, one will not know. But now that I'm bringing this Libya scenario, that's to show you the atrocity that is currently going on in Africa. Because sometimes one asks me that, do they have houses in Africa? Because when you look at this behavior that is being endorsed by the French government towards African descent and supporting brutal dictatorship forcefully against the will of the people to decide their destiny. And you can imagine how painful it is. Just imagine that 14 African countries can have their own currency managed by their central government, but must be managed by Caisse Communautaire Française. That Africa as a nation, distinctive nations in Africa, 14 that belongs to the French colony, does not have the liberty and freedom of their own currency, but must be controlled and by Caisse Communautaire Française against the backdrop of Africa. And that is why Africa is looking for a safe route, for a safe zone, because France is the architect that is perpetrating this atrocity throughout Africa. Why? France currency is not printed by Africa. Why must African currency be printed by the French? Let's look at it again. Let's proceed.
Being used by the Europeans because it suits their objective. The number one priority for European governments is to stop refugees and migrants from crossing the Mediterranean and arrive in Europe. Then they are not actually acting to stop the human rights violations in Libya.
Channel 4 News contacted the European Commission with our findings. They said, our priority in Libya has always been saving lives, protecting people, fighting trafficking and smuggling, and supporting the vulnerable. That's on paper. That's the official line at the summit, where Arab leaders have been raising the price for dealing with Europe's migration problem. Yet the human cost is measured not in euros, but in broken lives.
Matt Fry reporting. Was joining us now from New York is the Portuguese Socialist member of the European Parliament and former diplomat.
That's reporting from U.S. That is why I am so proud of the United States. That's the nation I'm so proud of. Because when you look the hypocrisy of the European Union towards Africa, and they have been a part of the atrocity that is continued perpetrated in Africa. I I have been speaking about the brutal dictatorship, Paul Biya Regime, is because it's been supported and funded by the French authority. It's funded by the French authority. And the citizens have no liberty to their own government. They have no liberty to change the system. They have no liberty to force the government into down. But France-sponsored military that use atrocity against these citizens that are fighting for liberty. And that is the way they are looking for a safe route to exit and look for European Union, European countries where they can look for a safe environment. Just imagine that they allow them, the citizens, to be able to bring down the regime that is not worth being in power. Then liberty will prevail, and that they can have an economy that is answerable to the indigenous. Then we will not have these net migrations. But because France benefits from that atrocity and using Libya as they should, let's listen to more.
Anna Maria Gomes. Ms. Gomes, we have seen these shattering images from Libya, and one wonders whether the price paid by the European Union can possibly justify tolerating these terrible conditions in Libya.
Not at all. This is horrific, but it's no surprise. It's tremendous, the callousness, the hypocrisy, the cynicism of those in the European Union, in the European Commission, but as well in the European Council, all governments, including the British government, that are pretending that they are saving lives, or they know very well that in Libya there is no such thing as the Libyan Coast Guard. What there are militias infiltrated by all sorts of criminals, networks, and including terrorist groups. They are the ones who have been paid by the EU to pretend that they are a fictional Libyan Coast Guard to indeed push back the migrants. They are the ones who explore the migrants, who sell the migrants. This is nothing new. This already existed in the days of Gaddafi. But of course now, what is tremendous is the complicity of the EU. EU governments go after this fascist regime, the government in Italy of Salvini, who there is no indeed migrant crisis. The number of people arriving in Italy has decreased 95% compared to 2010. The Commission numbers, figures. So there is no real migration crisis. And it's the fact that European governments don't counter the narrative, the nasty narrative of right-wing governments such as the Salvini government that explains this shame.
Well, that may be what voters want, but what I want to know from you is there any possibility of your mustering some kind of majority in the European Parliament to roll this back, or is it just a rubber stamp?
Look, in the European Parliament, we have confronted numerous times the Commission and member states, the Council, with indeed indeed they are with their political ways, controlled ways. We are actually feeding the mafias that are running this trafficking, this human trafficking.
That was what make up news in Africa, and the atrocity continue that is perpetrated by the European Union. And that is why when you look at the Southern Cameroon, the massive killing that is going on in Southern Cameroon territory is being perpetrated by another nation, the European, and that is Great Britain. Let's look at some of the images. That is a young man. As you can see these images, that is in Southern Cameroon. that's in Southern Cameroon, that the military of this brutal dictatorship that is being in power, that it happened that the U.S. Undersecretary for African Affairs, who is currently in La Republique, this is a human being. This is Southern Cameroon citizens that have been burnt alive, as close to their back. As you can see those images. This is a guy. He's been forced to remove his clothes. And they burned the bike and shot them together. Let's look. This young man, he's probably around 18 years old or 19. He's been shot on the arm and pierced here and came out through here. And you can see the motionless that is lying. That is in Southern Cameroon. This is probably 2 days ago. This is what make up news. This guy was shot. The bullet pierced his arm and came through his left chest wall and pierced through the right chest, and he died in a slanted. That is La Republique. That is currently going on live in Southern Cameroon right now as I'm speaking. This is the murder rate that is continued, perpetrated by this mentally deranged individual that is being put in place by the French that allowed no change in government to ever persist. Let's look. This is another young man. This is another young man that was shot. He died cold-bloodedly as he lies in the... That is the lifestyle that is currently going on. And that is why you can expect them to escape and towards Libya and search and look for a safe environment in Europe. And which why the Europeans keep a concentration camp in Libya so that they can be repatriated back. So if you look at the lifestyle that is going on in Southern Cameroon, then what do you expect? People will be migrating to somewhere else, searching for a safe environment, a safe place. Of course, some may be migrate to Europe. But in a case where the European Parliament deliberately funded a government that does not exist in Libya to be responsible as those videos I just shown you, then you expect what should happen in Africa. This is the point that I am bringing attention to the world community, especially the citizens of this great nation, the United States. Because what you don't see, what you don't know, exactly what is being perpetrated to the Africans in their own nations, that forcing a government upon them not to allow any meaningful democratic government to prevail. And that is what you see, because that is the constant murdering going on live. Let's look. You can see. This is entire family or village community that has been just shot and killed, burned their home, destroyed their entire properties, disturbed. That is absolute lifestyle. It's not something that happened a few days ago. It's something that is ongoing as I'm speaking. It's something that is ongoing in West Africa. Then you can expect why there is a massive migrant looking for a safe environment and an opportunity to make a decent living, because they can't even live in their home because we have a dictatorship that is slaughtering them in their home. Let's take a look. On the street, you can see on the street. On the street, you can see exactly what I am talking about. These are human beings that have been shot by the evil military dictatorship indiscriminately. And at a certain point, they even shot a mad person, or whether he was shot or was picked up. Somebody's trying to clarify it here on the live video here. I hope he's still alive. You can see. In another scenario, this happened in Womb, for those who happen to be from Mencho. These are people that were shot live and were taken back to a burning home and roasted their corpse. You can understand that they shot and placed back in their burning homes. For those from mention, that's what happened. Look. Those are cops. Those are cops. Burnt. So I spoke about top U.S. diplomat a few minutes ago. So I want to end this conversation here. So the U.S. top Undersecretary for African Affairs is in La République and to meet some other officials. But what I want to let La République to understand that the United States is systematically building a case against the Biya regime. But I urge them to take note that the United States doesn't make mistake. The United States government doesn't make mistake. The United States is building a systematic case against La République, as the entire system, the entire regime. And the United States will take upon them at any moment from now. So let them pay close attention. And if I was a president of that nation, I would take extra precautionary and take close attention. As the Undersecretary, the high-level United States, is now in La République. Before that, a top U.S. general came onto the media. It's not just one general. 2 U.S. generals have spoken. And now the Undersecretary has spoken. The U.S. ambassador has spoken. So if I am in La République, I will take extra precautionary. But I have asked La République once more, let go Southern Cameroon. Because that is going to sink La République and the entire system together. Let Southern Cameroon go. Southern Cameroon is never a colonial territory of La République. Southern Cameroon is an own distinctive nation on its own. Let's look at the document. That is a legal document that was voted in 1961 to recognize the sovereignty of the people of Southern Cameroon. So I urge the La République to take extra precaution because Southern Cameroon will sink, and when the Southern Cameroon will sink La République to the last level, let La République take extra precautions because once the highest level member delegation from the United States is paying a visit just to speak, and they are paying a deaf ear. But I give them extra precaution that they are on the wrong side of the game. The people of Southern Cameroon want to be let go. They do not want to live with La République du Cameroon. And to those Southern Cameroons, I want to speak that it's time we start looking for a currency of the Southern Cameroon. Because so long as we dwell on the CFA, then we are a liability of La République. We don't have to be at the forefront to manage the currency. So long as our brothers and sisters, in the days of trade by barter, it doesn't require a foreign nation to recognize the trade by barter. It was an understanding between two partners that agree mutually to trade. Just like those who have traveled to Gwenga market. And someone who brought crayfish can exchange with plantains. It doesn't require international endorsement. So we should be on the side. We should be looking on exploratory. This is the map of the Southern Cameroon. So that's the U.S. diplomat that is currently in La République. And that ends the news. I want to thank you for watching. It's been a good Sunday, and I'm sorry for taking all of your time. But remember that La Republique must take extra precaution because they are on the wrong side of the game. I wish you all a happy Sunday. It has been Funton Daniel speaking here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States. And those in Ground Zero, I stand with you together. We are together in this business. Freedom lies ahead. Liberty lies ahead. But we must fight for it. We are together in this business. This is Funton Daniel speaking here from the great state of Texas, here in the United States. I wish you all the rest of your day.